Welcome to Tuesdays with Dr. Tracy. I hope all is well. Woohoo, Tuesdays with Dr. Tracy. Oh, 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 oh. Okay, really, I never need any music. I would dance to just the frequencies in my own head, I guess. But anyways, welcome back. So, post Thanksgiving. I hope you all had an amazing Thanksgiving. I'm sure it's great. I'm sure you all probably have some wonderful stories to tell as well. I hope all the dishes came out right because we had a little turkey crisis. Yeah, so the turkey was half resurrected. Okay, carving the turkey, carved in. Once we got down, to the dark meat, that turkey was like, I was like, oh my God, it was still alive, y'all. It was still, it was raw. So, needless to say, and the turkey had been smoked. It was a smoked turkey. No, we didn't smoke it. They had it smoked by someone who had their own company, and they got smoked. It's not funny, but thank God for good signs, right? Thank God for good signs. It was a smaller dinner, but it was funny. It was much to laugh at, I'm telling you. So I didn't pay for that. That was on my cousin and aunt and them on my mom's side. So they have that to work out, with how that would work out. It was funny because the turkey was actually supposed to be fried, but it was smoked. But that's a whole nother story. But see, this is what happens at holidays. It was a little different because normally, there'd be like more than one meat for sure. And then plenty of sides. But, they had downgraded because the group was smaller. So, yeah. But that is what happened. But everything else was great. So, you have to keep, you have to keep laughing. Learn to laugh. Laughter helps me cope. But many of the others as well. So a few things. Last week was the book talk for Scholar Hour here at Sankofa. They have a Scholar Hour series, and so happened I was the scholar to be highlighted last week to talk about my books, Steve Biko and the Radical Gospel of Black Consciousness. Okay, there are some copies, I believe, here in the store. They were able to get some to come in. But and if anyone wanted me to sign them, I can do so. Now, mind you, you all take it easy on me. Okay, this was my dissertation, my first heavy writing project, But there will be other things to follow for sure. I'm excited about some of the research I'm going to be getting into very, very, very soon. So, woohoo! Now, we still have one more copy of Michael Harriot's book, Black AF History, for those who are able to chime in on Instagram. This only works on Instagram if you're able to actually hit that join button to join in and say hello. Even if you're just saying, hey, I want that book, that is perfectly fine. And we'll be more than happy to send it to you, okay? If you're not in the DC area. But if you are in the DC area, of course, we invite you to come on into the store and pick it up. For those who may be interested, this is our last copy, Black AF History by Michael Harriot, okay? So please make sure you do that. And one other thing, here is the Steve Biko book, okay? And I can definitely sign it for you if you would like. They have some copies here in the store. So when you stop through, if you're interested in having a copy, I hope you will pick up a copy when you come through to Sankofa. Also, there are going to be some fundraising events coming up December 30th. Please make sure you go to sankofa.com. Sankofa.com, okay, and you'll see about December the 30th. It's a fundraiser, so you have to purchase tickets. The information is there on the site. You'll be able to have there'll be refreshments. You get to see some of Haile Garima's films that will be coming out, some of his projects that he's working on. You'll also be able to meet him if you haven't done that before. I think he's going to have a discussion as well, I think, following the viewing of his movie Sankofa, okay? And his wife, Sharikiana, Garima will also be here. So this will be a great opportunity for you to be able to network, but to be able to hear them, to hear more about the film and the different projects that they have going now. So please, if you just want to donate as well, there are QR codes on the website where you can donate. Okay. We have to make sure we support our Black businesses, our smaller Black businesses in our community across the nation. We have to make sure we uphold each other in a good way to keep money in the Black community. Okay, so make sure you check out saycofa.com. So, as I was thinking about what to talk about this week, now for next week, I'm gonna tell you next week. In this, I'm gonna dedicate, of course, to my mother, but also to all moms. But Jerusalem, I was talking to Jerusalem, and you all don't know her, but she knows when she hears it. She knows I'm talking about her nose here in Sankofa who know her. We were talking, just talking about lessons from our mothers, and she was like, you know what? You should do a show on just that. And I said, you know what? That's a good idea. So I'm going to dedicate that to her. Hopefully, we'll get an opportunity to go down and maybe film, one of these Tuesdays with Dr. Traci from their studios. They have a wonderful gallery down there with beautiful handmade jewelry. They have paintings and photos, just a lot of beautiful things down there in the gallery. She and Gazal, so we have to, hopefully Gazal come on and share a little bit about his studio one day soon. We're going to try to hook that up as well. So next week, we're definitely going to be talking about those lessons that we learned from our mom, those little things that they teach us, that stick with us for life and how valuable they are. So yeah, that will be coming up. But for this week, I thought it would be great as we're looking forward to the holidays. And not just during the holidays am I asking this question, but how do we preserve our history and our culture, African culture within our home or within our community? How do you do it across the board? It's not just in your home, your community, wherever you deem that it is most appropriate based on you. Now, there are many people do several different things, but I wanted us to be able to have a conversation about that. And perhaps you can share ways in which you preserve African culture so that others may be able to learn and maybe share theirs and you all can swap. Okay, so please make sure you put it in the chat. You're welcome to come on and share things that you may do to help preserve African culture. While I'm teaching, we have many discussions throughout the class. So we're definitely talking about African culture. But you begin to see how often students are saying, why didn't they teach us this in high school? Why didn't they teach us this in middle school? I wish I would have known that. I've also had classes where it was predominantly white, and they were like, wow, I wish we were taught this. Why didn't they teach us this in high school? And then they'd say, man, the only thing I really know about African culture or Black people is what I see on social media. And my God, when I look at social media and what I see as a representation of Black folk on social media, I'm like, this is totally misinformed because you get this much, but so many people see it and they take this much and apply it to everybody. And it's unfortunate. Social media has its pluses, it definitely does. But sometimes you see the downfalls of it. So it's like, so how can we begin to preserve that and continue to show pride in our African culture, in our Blackness, right? To have that Black consciousness. And I'm really serious. How do we do that? It can be something as simple as how you wear your hair. It was maybe the last time I had braids in my hair before I put them in my hair for this summer in August when I was going to Egypt. It had been since I was probably like 8 or 9 years old. Okay. And I hadn't had braids from that point. It was my first time having braids. Now it's different than having two or one single braid. Yes, I've done that, but when I'm talking about braids, like, several. And man, when I had them there, it was funny the amount of conversation that I had around my braids. People asking me who did my braids, how da 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 da, and immediately it created a conversation. And I was like, wow, look at this, another avenue for bringing in African culture and exposing others to African culture, right? There are other ways. This piece I have on now, this right here, so many people ask me, where did you get that? Who made it? Where is it from? Da 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 da. Once that happens, that creates a conversation about Africa. So there are little things we can do, but there are also large things we can do. Kwanzaa is coming up. We have a question.
Comment from Face Forward. He said, "We know it naturally on a cellular level. Because of systematic miseducation, the mere mention of it repels most Black folks." I think he's speaking about African culture in general.
Yeah, because, and you're absolutely right. And I think and we have to deal with that. And I think it's because we've been taught that it's so inferior, that it's not important, that it's backwards, it's uncivilized, it's evil. So when that is ingrained in the psyche of people, we have to have our minds decolonized. So it is hard, and it is that people actually do look down on African culture, on Africanness, on Blackness globally. This is an issue. I was listening to a scholar the other day, and one of the comments that he made was that, you know what, before he was educated about Africa, before he did all this research, before, he was like, when you would mention Africa to me, when you would talk about, call me African or any such thing, it was an insult. It was considered an insult. I was ready to fight you. He said, now it's the proudest moment of my life when somebody calls me African. I'm like, thank you. Because he came to understand the richness and the beauty of African culture, of Africa, of the African people, of traditions, African traditions. Many things that we've been taught is wrong, backwards, or evil. So yes, it is very systemic in that regard. And we have to work hard to change that. And it's like, so how can we do that? What are the small ways and large ways that we're able to do? We have to use what we have. We have different platforms. We have different areas in life we can touch. And we have to start there, So that may be with you. It may be the way you decide to wear your hair. It may be learning an African language, okay? And like, for instance, Zulu, okay? When I was learning Zulu, the Zulu language, yeah, it was tough at points, but the teacher, Dr. Piwo Mnayendu, he's at Howard University, he teaches Zulu. I mean, he made them laughing because he was just that fun. He made learning Zulu fun. He taught us about Zulu culture, and much of it cannot even be grasped with English language at all, And so being able to learn about that, learn about the different foods, learn about the different value systems and norms that they have in their culture and amongst the Zulu ethnic group, it was absolutely amazing. So we find different ways in order to lock in on that and then try to preserve it. I know, who is it, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, he's really been big on talking about decolonization of the mind, right? But one of the ways in which he says that happens is through language, through being able to preserve African traditional language, or what they would call mother tongues, right? And being able to do that is so key and important, because most often what has happened is that colonial languages have been imposed and have become the official national language. So you see many countries within Africa try and fight to make sure that their languages, the indigenous languages, are actually official languages. Okay, so that, and you're like, well, what difference does it make? Because that means it's a difference between a book being printed in English and one being printed, let's say, for instance, in Zulu, right? So then that's very important because that also determines how a child learns. It also determines how one may be able to access applications in government or applying for a job. The very simple and basic things that we take for granted here because everything is simply in English. So when you see that there, it is very important because they're able to communicate. It can quickly put up barriers, you know. So that's so language becomes one of those ways. You know, so what about religion? African traditional religions. That's a big one because they have been demonized so much that people are like, no, 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 without even knowing anything about it. Whether you choose to embrace it or not, it's like at least learn about it, know about it, and understand why you're saying no. If you choose to say no, then understand it. But it's nothing wrong with knowing and being knowledgeable about, okay? And then you can make up your mind for yourself, okay? But you can also embrace that and embrace those who practice those different traditional belief systems or spiritual systems. And what's the difference, you know? But instead, the first thing, anything that's African or Black, most often, quickly, too quickly, you see people say, and it's like, who taught you to hate you? Who taught you to hate yourself? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin, the shape of your body, you know, the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate your history, to not believe in the greatness that has been very much a part of your history? Who told you you were poor when you were born in the richest lands? Who told you as an African American you were not connected to Africa? And to do so was an insult. Right now, we see that big push, right? We all see it with not wanting African anything or Black anything to really be taught in schools unless it's a little bit or it's the whitewashed version of it, right? And we see that now that they like banning the books, they banning this, banning that. They don't want this being taught. They want to keep this out of the schools and so on and so forth. Why do you think they're fighting so hard? So we have to make sure that we become the preservers of African history, that we become the memory keepers, right? That we are the ones that's going to take and share this information with our families, with our children, grandchildren, with our communities. This is so important. And students, they ask me like, in what ways can we share that? Or I say, you tell me. You think of ways that you think you can share that history with someone else quickly. I mean, you know, like how can you do that? Something as simple as gifting somebody a book, or for those who are writers to write a book, to do the research. There are various ways, but we all have to make sure that we are doing our part, right? Whatever it is we can do, however small you think that thing is, that thing connected to someone else doing something is very important, like a Black business, like for instance, the bookstore. It is very important. Why? Because it introduces people to African culture. It centers it, right? It brings it to the community. It brings it to scholars. So it brings scholarship to the people. Okay. And so it becomes a very critical place. It becomes a place where people can have discussions, okay, about their Blackness, about Black consciousness. It happens. So you can see how important that is in the community. People have gone so far as to actually start schools, African-centered schools. Okay, that's another way in which we do it. We do it through dance. You know, many times, you know, it's becoming more popular to listen to Afro beats and other forms of African music because it's part of the popular culture now. But I mean, just think about the different ways in which you can also introduce African culture and preserve it through music, right?
Face Forward said, once he mentioned, there are a few comments. Once he mentioned anything outside of the Christian industrial complex, our people, and it's like mind blown emoji.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And
That's
then
true.
Donna Perry Anderson said, they are trying to erase us from history, aka our history.
Yes.
And then Face Forward said, how can we connect institutions like yours with our like minds?
Oh wow.
With other like minds.
Wow. You know, it's hard. It is a community effort. It really is. We talk about grassroots movements, mobilization. It really is. It's up to the people. We cannot. I don't know. We have to be mindful. We have become comfortable with allowing the oppressor to teach our children, to provide us answers to the problems that they've caused. We depend on them way more than what we should. We give them far too much power in our lives. And that's from a spiritual point of view, a psychological point of view, and we can go on and on and on and on. So that's why I'm like, we can find different ways to meet people. Like there are those with African dance troupes that come to communities and they actually teach African dance. But part of teaching African dance is to talk about African history and culture, right? And something I mentioned braids earlier, but braids, I mean, there are a lot. I mean, people talk about when braids were used as maps, you know, to help show escape routes for enslaved Africans in the Americas, right? But they also have other meanings within their cultural context. It has to do with age, like some hairstyles were used to show age, or if someone was married, if someone was single, or if someone was coming of age, like the rites of passage, so on and so forth. If someone was a widow, all these very, and for women and for men. Okay, different hairstyles meant different things. So I'm just using that as an example. I also would think when we start community groups and share books, okay? When you get a book group together, right? And you talk about different books that focus on African culture or Black history and those connections within our community across the globe, introducing books with images of Black children and Black people in them for children. How important that is to see them reflected in a very positive way. Um, yeah, so we have to be more innovative and creative in finding those ways to be able to connect and share that. And there are little things that we can do. If they can try to erase the history all they want, they can't. Okay, but we have to figure out ways in which we keep that alive. As memory keepers, we have a responsibility. It's not just the teacher's responsibility or this person, an elder sitting all the way over there in the corner. No, it's all of our responsibilities. And how many of us even sit and talk to our elders? Unfortunately, many of them are left in homes and other places without that type of conversation. And here you have a library right before you, you know, and we don't take that time to sit down and talk to them as young folk. And older folk, we have to learn that we have to take time out to sit down and talk to our children, you know, and share this history with them. You know, you have grandkids, make that time, set that time aside and actually share with them about your life and about your history and what you know of Black history. And what you don't know is not out of reach. We can all learn. I'm forever learning. I said one of the things that I think I learned most in receiving a PhD is that I knew nothing. I know absolutely nothing. With the vast of knowledge and information that's out there in the world, and every time you uncover one thing, there's like 10,000 other things that are there to be uncovered. It's like, oh man, it's almost like going down a rabbit hole sometimes. But the more knowledge you have about your own history, you're able to share that. It is just the little things that we can do. I see people have podcasts where they talk about history. Matter of fact, they actually may highlight a particular person or place or an event every week. That's what they do in order to bring Africa to the people, or Blackness, Black history from a global world perspective to the people. And they're constantly doing this so that people can be aware, because it also instills a sense of pride, right? I mean, people start feeling good about themselves. That's the difference from history entering as slavery okay, in history entering prior to slavery, so that you can see the lead up to the smaller blip in history once you see colonialism, slavery and colonialism and all of that enter in. There was a comment brought up about the Christian complex. And yes, because you have, when you start talking about hermeneutics and interpretation of scriptures, is very important because most times people understand them outside or within their own situation, okay, within their own existence, within their own context, okay, and they begin, and depending on what their motives are, right? So you take something like the Christian message, and I'm gonna give you an example. I will work back from this. I was on the internet and I saw something and it said orange Jesus, the orange Jesus. I say, oh Father God, I can only imagine what this is. And I was right. It was Trump. It was referencing to Trump, and it had like Jesus with like an orange and some orange juice and something else. In essence, to kind of connect Jesus, Trump to Jesus, like a savior, if you will, of some sort. Who he's saving what from and saving them to, only the Lord knows. But it was that, and I'm like, wow, it is true. There are several versions of Jesus in this world, okay? And unfortunately, I think when we see what we call like European, a part of like white supremacy, when we start to see that colonization and so on, when you see the Jesus of that time period and the message that was being presented to create the white man as being superior and those who were of African descent or who were African as inferior, right? You start to see a different type of hermeneutic presented as far as the Christian message is concerned. And so you see apartheid born out of that, racism born out of that, because they have the story about Ham and how Ham was cursed and Ham was ducked and black, and oh man, they just go on and on and on with this skewed type of teaching in and around the Gospels and in and around just biblical history. As it was, but then you see emerging this idea of Black theology, where you see Black people then relating Jesus to one who was oppressed, who was marginalized, and who had to experience the hatred of the system and then to be executed by the system and so on and so forth. So you then see this different type of Jesus, this one who was willing to fight back against the system, who was speaking truth to power and so on and so forth. So then this creates a whole different element. One who says that, who you are, you were made in the image and likeness of God, that your Black is beautiful, your Black is this. And so it reaffirms the Black person and then reconnects them to God. That's part of what Steve Biko was talking about, but not just Biko. You have people like James Cone, okay? He's considered the father of Black theology. Howsoever, he coined the term, he coined it, Black theology, but it has always existed, right? Where you see Black people taking the scriptures and finding how they relate to the scriptures, right? And then using that to teach and uplift and empower the people. Whereas you see in opposition to that, whites who then took that and used it as a tool of oppression and subjugation, exploitation. And so see, there you have it. You're right. Sometimes people take Christianity and use it in a very negative way. It's the same way they use it in order to do human trafficking and all types of other ungodly evils, okay, to fleece the flock and taking people's money. You see, people can make the scriptures say what they want it to say in order to advance their own agenda. Right. So we must be mindful when looking at any religion or spiritual system. Okay. To make sure, use the mind that God gave you. Don't be a fool for anyone. God did not create you to be a fool. God did not raise you up to be a fool. He's giving you good common sense, so use it. So that becomes very, very important, which is why I'm saying, even if you choose, we know that Christianity is born out of the Abrahamic religions, born out of a Jewish tradition, culture, and experience, right? And then you see the early movements of Christianity as we will understand and know, like in Ethiopia and other places where you start to see more of an evangelistic type of movement with the word going out, with people taking this message out further beyond, Jerusalem and Nazareth and all these places like that. So you see it stretching out and going out into the wider world. And you see this early movement in Africa. You see these early convening of conferences, if you will, councils, okay, to discuss what's going to go into the Bible, what's not, and looking at these different manuscripts to consider which ones were most important and urgent and speak to the entire story, Jewish story, based on their history. So you see and follow their timeline. So you see this thing born out of their cultural experience. So then why would you demonize something born out of an African cultural experience? Okay, so you can still see and learn from that, and learn spiritual truths from that, learn about your history, and learn about other African culture, and still be just as free. You can still be very much a devout Christian and love Jesus, and still find out these things. I preach the gospel. I found my spiritual experience through the Christian path, and that's fine. That's where I found my connection to the Lord, and that's my experience, but that's not everybody's. Okay? So, and I do look and read and study up on other religions. And you'd be surprised on what you find out. You'd be surprised about those religions that existed thousands of years before the formation of Christianity, or those early years of Judaism and things like that, where there's proof and all these other things of their religion and their spiritual systems, and how you see some of these reflected even in later writings of the Bible. So we can go on and on and on and on. So that's what I'm saying. We must be more aware and conscious of who we are, and what that looks like. And I'm sorry to say that I think far too often, too many of us have drank the orange Kool-Aid, okay? And that's what something else that was in that photo. It was actually some orange Kool-Aid, okay? And I think that's too many people drinking. Oh, put down the orange Kool-Aid, please. But yeah, but when you really looking at learning, and the more you learn about history, the more you learn about yourself, the more you learn about the world at large, and then things start to change. Our view here in America is very small. Okay, and they meant for it to be that way because it allows for a certain type of assimilation, okay, in their society based on their norms and their agenda, right? But when you start to look at that thing worldwide, and you start looking at the global complex of whiteness, okay, that changes everything. You start to see this thing from a whole different perspective, and then you really see more of this global agenda. And you're like, oh, no, 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 no. So we have to be mindful about how do we now remember, because that was the main thing they wanted us to forget, is who we were and our connection and what that meant, the amount of knowledge and truth we had housed in us. They wanted us to forget those things. Now, as there is more awareness, okay, of what Africa is, and who the African woman is, who the African man is, the African child, the African elder, the ancestor. Who is this? What does the African God look like? Is that a God who loves us for us? Who loves our features? Who loves our ability to dance, our ability to speak in several different languages? Is that our God? Because this other one, based on those teachings, okay, from that complex, all right, has been telling us everything but that. So that's where we have to really make sure that we are connecting back. And that's why it's important to remember. You know, because I think it was Ngugi wa Thiong'o that said we have been dismembered through colonization, and that type of oppression and things, it is a form of. You can hear that from Fran Fanon, um, um, who else? Paulo Freire, you know, different ones talking about the violence that's found in oppression, okay, and how that type of psychological, physical, economical, we can go on and on, all these various types of social ills and violence against a human person, against their humanity, against their dignity, and how their culture, their language, all their history, all these things are just stripped from them. That is violent. And then you impose another way upon them. So that is like a dismembering. It's almost like a murder, right? And so he's like, no, there has to be a remembering. If you can imagine taking and putting all those parts back together again, you remember, you put the person back to a whole state of being, and that's where we must start. We have to say, okay, how do we put us back together again? And it's like, how do we do that? And now, especially in the pan African sense, because we are all over the world because of enslavement, right? Well, not only just because of enslavement, we were out there before slavery happened. We had already made means to travel to other parts of the world. But you see this type of remembering. He said that is important. And part of the way we do that is through language. There's a comment.
Che Peso says, how can we follow God through religions that have been purposely altered to indoctrinate people into a negative state of mind?
Well, again, that is not how everyone has used it. And I think that is important. I think that was probably one of the things, the beauties about Black theology, right? They were able to take that and connect and find their own story in that, their own meaning, their own narrative. It was almost like they Africanized that story, okay? Or even connect back to their roots, because part of what you would see with that idea of a Trinity or Savior and so on and so forth is not new to spirituality, not new to religion, not out of the African context. It is not. But anyways, in trying to find that again, that was the break off and from a European hermeneutic that is used to oppress, and a Black hermeneutic that is used to liberate. Okay, so it's really about what you're going to use to feed your spirit, and learning the scriptures and going somewhere where you can learn, if that's what you're talking about in the sense of looking at Christianity, because then you would have to look at Islam, you would have to look at Judaism, we can go, but we don't have time to do all that today. What is it with any of them? Learning to find your connection to that and going to a place and being able to have those resources that's going to pour into your spirit and feed you based on your context, and get a truer meaning of that, that particular religion. So that is very, very, very important. We have to, it takes work, which is why it's important that we do way more reading, okay? And that means reading resources beyond the Bible. You have to be a scholar. If you're going to be a scholar about it, reading those history books, learning about early, for instance, with Kemet, ancient Egypt, learning about their spiritual systems, learning about that history there. That is important because that then shows up in the Old Testament. Okay, so you want to see these things and how other people have taken to try to take in. Let me not say take them, but they have made strides in making sure that is lost, forgotten, hidden, and so on and so forth. But now because of technology, because we have more Black scholars that are out there, more who paved the way, like a Asa Hilliard, like a Dr. Obinga, Dr. Ben, I'm trying to think of the other, Dr. Chakanta Joe. That, I mean, people like that, and then you just start to see them just trickle down over the years and that number grow. And people who are actually going back into Africa, learning hieroglyphs and other African languages, and then being able to look at other resources, primary resources, to do research, to have labs, to do lab work on different on corpses, you know, and on remains and things of that nature, to fossils, to be able to give us a true story. So we have that responsibility now, to actually help give the world back their human dignity across the board. Definitely for the Black world, for other people who are do not, let's see, align with Blackness in the sense of they do not, which isn't a bad thing. It's like, so just non-white, we'll just say those, but I don't like to center whiteness like that. But we'll say those who are non-white, and then they're able to bring about a certain perspective to this conversation as well, to talk about the different civilizations and cultures that were out there, societies that were out there before, you know, before we see this elevation of whiteness, okay? And remembering where humanity all began. So this is it. We come to a close. It's time to go. You know I'm going to miss you until next week. This was getting really juicy, but we are on a time schedule, you know. I want to stay with you all always, but look, have an amazing week. Stay blessed. Know that you are amazing and awesome. You better walk in your Blackness, okay? Walk in your Africanness. Know who you are. Know what greatness lies within you. Know the rich history that is within you. And please remember to be the barriers of African cultural or African culture by preserving it in whatever ways you deem best based on your skills, talents, and strengths. I love you so much. If you haven't heard that, I love you just because you're you. And I will see you next week. Mwah, 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 mwah. Peace out.